Concentrate mostly in this video on lookup as a function, HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP, and we shall explore when to use these lookups to solve a problem. After looking at the lookup function and what it is supposed to be used for, we shall have another video where we'll solve questions related to what we have learned in lookups. Lookup functions. Why lookups? These are used or behave as using relational databases, and that's how I want you to see lookups. Mostly, you'll be required to bring in values from one table, a specific table. The table contains values that correlate to some values in another set of data somewhere. It can either be in the same sheet, it can be in a different sheet in the same workbook, or it can be in another workbook somewhere. The reference table will be called the array, depending on the function that we are using. The key point you have to look out in lookups is to look for the values in your data set that has similar values in your reference table. The value that has similar data in the lookup table is your lookup value. Okay, so we have said a lot. What do I mean? If you look at this data, there is site code in here. And site code, mind you, is the most left value, the leftmost value in this table. And we have this other one down here. In this exercise, whenever we have the site code, we should be able to identify the location, and you can see location here as well. We should be able to identify the swing, and we have looked at this concept before in our previous video. How do you know the kind of lookup to use? This clearly becomes our reference table, our lookup table. This becomes our lookup value. When we know this, and just like in relational databases, when we know this, we should be able to identify all of these other information that is related to this code. In finding out the particular lookup, you look at the structure of your table. In here, you can see up here that we have column labels, and our data moves down one at a time. This data set over here, because they are showing as columns and the data comes under getting you one complete record in each row, we use a VLOOKUP function, and I shall explore and explain further as we go along. Okay, so since our reference table requires us to use is structured vertically, we use a VLOOKUP function. So equal to VLOOKUP. Previously, I told you it is best you use this function key so that when you call the function, it shows you all the parameters that you need to complete the function. Clearly, my lookup value is here, this cell. Oh, there's something wrong. Good. This becomes my lookup value. My table of array, whenever you are selecting your table, do not include the column headings. Select your table of array. Now, the rest of the data is where we'll get our output. And the table has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns together. The first column, which contains our lookup values, plus the next. So we can now start collecting our output from the second column. So column 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth and so on. The site location is in column 2, and that becomes our column index. It is in the second column that we want to bring out the data. This is a direct match, and we shall look at another example where we have approximate matches. A lot of times students ask, when are we going to use the approximate match? In this video, I'll show you the approximate match very soon. So it is direct match. What do I mean by it is direct match? We don't have values between B55/871 and B92/756. There isn't any value in between. The values over here are direct. If I should change even a single value in here, it will not match to any value in my lookup values. So we use direct match, and it gets our output for us in column 2. So if we look at this value, B54871, which is here, our site location is there nicely positioned. As I explained earlier, if I should intentionally change this value even by 1, maybe it will correspond to it. But if it doesn't, it should give us an error. It looks into your table and says that I cannot find this value. First, there is no corresponding output that I can provide. Let me bring it back. Good. We also saw in our previous video how we can create what we call absolute references. If you see in my function currently, my table, which is supposed to remain constant even when I go through all of these, is currently not constant. If I should duplicate, the table will change. And so we know that. Now I'm sure we understand why this value needs to be locked using our F4 key. Enter. Okay. Again, this site value is equally supposed to remain constant. The only thing that is supposed to change in this our example is the column values. Okay. So I'll go back to my formula and lock B18 as well. If I duplicate, however, I'll get the same values, but efficiency will help me just to go in there and change my column values. That is much more easier than good. It is much more easier than typing in the functions all over again. So this is in column 4, that is column 5, and overall results. Oh, climbing frame is in column 6. And the overall is in column 7. That's the last column in our table. Okay, so we've seen one set of data. We also saw that in our previous video, we can make this, you see, it says change code here. We can type it in, but to prevent data entry errors, we can create data validation for this purpose. So list, and we can select from our lists. Okay, and this time around, we can select and everything else will change automatically nicely. Let me center align all of these, home, center align. Okay, great. Let's look at another example. In this example, we have this data. If you look carefully, and sometimes I tell students, by just looking at the data set, you should be able to tell what is your lookup trying to do. What type of lookup are you supposed to use? And then you pay attention to the question to look at any other function you are supposed to add to your lookup. Just like in our previous video, our table of array is vertical in nature. The data comes under, and we are supposed to pick the next column, the values from the next column, which is bonus per customer. As you can see over here in these values, the bonuses are in ranges. Here, the values itself do not specifically or directly link to values in here. Some may, but not all of them. If you look here, we do not have 50, we have 51. Okay, if you look here, we have 18, but there's no 18 in our lookup value. Does that mean we cannot use a VLOOKUP function? Yes, we can. The only difference here is that you use what we call the approximate match. Again, bring out your dialog box. So our lookup value is in this cell. Our table is this. Do not select the column headings, and it is column 2. Instead of selecting false in this nature, we'll select true so that it will approximate the values. If it doesn't find this directly in here, it will look for the next value that corresponds to the lookup values. Okay. Again, let's make the table constant. And in this situation, each value would correspond to the cells, the values in this column. So we don't have to make this one constant. So when I bring it down or I duplicate, I have the values that is corresponding in each row nicely. So once again, let's look at the value 23. 23 does not correspond to any value in here in our lookup table. However, the next value between 20 and 30 has 23 in there, which relates more to 75. Okay, you see same over here, 22, 75, 37 is giving you 100, so 30, blah, blah, blah. And because this data is sorted in ascending order, usually when you have such reference, that's what you use. Somebody will ask, okay, in what situation can I use a lookup function instead of VLOOKUP? And we shall look at that in another question. Let's look at the approximate match once again, an example of the approximate match. And there is another file. By the way, all these files are from wiseowl.co.uk. It's a website that contains a lot of exercises that you can use and explore. And they are free. The exercises are free. So please get in there and you can download these files that I'm using in this tutorial and practice. wiseowl.co.uk. Right. So just like we saw in the other table, these values are not directly, corresponding to values over here, but we can approximate. And again, our table structure is vertical in nature. So our lookup value is this. Our lookup table is that. This time around, I'll lock it before I move on to the next. Then our column is just 2 columns, and our output is coming from column 2, and it is true. So yeah, 6 is medium. After 5, you go next to 6, and they all correspond to this. Okay, now we duplicate and we have these values. Okay, the last file in this tutorial has 2 of the functions. Again, pupil name shows over here. That's supposed to be our lookup values. So again, I'll select from the list using my data validation. Great. Good. So instrument is in the second column, grade is in the third column. Grade, yes, third column, center, fourth, date is in the fifth column. And if I know the date, I'll know the time. The date, there are values in the date over here, and they are based on your center. Now, if you look carefully, this table structure is slightly different from what we have seen in our previous examples. Even though these look like column headings, the data is actually structured horizontally. We have the exam center, and then the values are to the right. As compared to this, we have student name, and the values are below. So the exam center will determine the date. Exam center will determine the date. So the date value is under the exam center. In this case, the appropriate validation to use, lookup to use is the HLOOKUP, because our table of structure is horizontal in nature. It goes across. Here, our table goes down, and that is why this is VLOOKUP. Our table shows VLOOKUP. Here, our table is horizontal in nature. So let's try it. Let's do it at this point. So equal to HLOOKUP, and the HLOOKUP and the VLOOKUP have a very similar syntax. The only difference is the row index number. So in VLOOKUP, you see a column index number. That is, you are picking your output from a column. In HLOOKUP, you are picking your output from a row. Basically, that's the difference. So our center has been covered, but I know it is D4. So I can put that in there. Oh, sorry. D4. Good. Our table of array is here. And our outcome should be from the second row. The second row. And the range lookup. These are direct. We don't have values between Bristol and Edinburgh. We can have Bristol 1.0 and Bristol 2.5. Here, our values are specific. If it is Bristol, it is these dates. We don't have any range between Bristol and Edinburgh. So in that case, we use the false value. Good. Once again, this table needs to be logged. Okay. So York, you can check. Yeah, and the value is there nicely. I can now duplicate down here. Good. So my HLOOKUP has been completed nicely. The next are these values. Currently, there's no value in here. So if I should create my lookup function, it will lead into an error because it can't find any value that is corresponding to my lookup table. This is where some error handling functions can come in, or even using a normal if function. So let's try it, and we shall explore conditional statements such as if later. So I'll say if this cell is blank, then let the function, the output also be blank. Either than that, create my VLOOKUP for me. So this is my lookup value. My table of array is here. Again, do not select your column headings when you are using your lookup. And my column index is 2. For instrument, range is false because it is direct match. Okay. Okay, I did not close. So you can see that it is blank. If I did not include the if function, it would have given me an error when there is no value over here. Once again, lock your table. And this also, B26 needs to be locked because it's the only value that we are supposed to use to get into our table. F4, F4. Then when I come down, I can now change the column. Grade is in column 3. There is something that we can do to pick up these values from here. But we shall explore that when we are looking at questions. Its center is 4. And then now we have the date, which was previously blank. And time, I think, is 5. Okay, so let's pick a lookup value and see what it shows. Again, I think I've duplicated somewhere. Home, center align, center is Bristol. Okay, so 8 is 5. And time is 6. Good. So this one needs to be formatted as a date. And this needs to be formatted as time. Good. Open it up so that everything shows. Okay, so this brings to the end our tutorial on lookups. We have seen or explored VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. When do you use these lookups? HLOOKUP is used when the table of reference has row labels. VLOOKUP is when the table of reference has column labels. As when we look at more examples, you shall see this. HLOOKUP cannot be used to reference tables where the data we want to bring in our data set is on top of our lookup value or to the top. What do I mean? In this data set, the last one that we looked at, yes, this. If the date was on top of the exam center, we could not use HLOOKUP for that purpose. Same if instrument, grade, center were to the left of our lookup values, which is the student name, we could not use VLOOKUP. And that is where lookup will come in. The lookup function, however, has its own challenges. If the values are not direct or specific, the lookup function will not work. We shall look at an example in our next video when we are solving questions. Good. So VLOOKUP cannot be used to reference tables where the data we want to output is to the left of our lookup values. Lookup function was intended to solve these inefficiencies of the HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP. But of course, there is another function called the XLOOKUP, which we shall also explore in our next video. The syntax has been explained, and this is a recap. I hope to see you in our next video where we solve questions that are related to these functions that we have explored. And especially in Cambridge IGCSE, almost every paper, and I say almost because there are some questions that do not use lookups. Some use simple mathematical functions, but you will see lookups in almost every question in IG. In A-level, questions are spread across, and whenever you have a lookup function, it may be complex than what we have seen. Okay, see you in the next video as we solve questions on this lesson.